Greetings, everyone, and welcome. October the 7th, 2025, and the war in Ukraine has shifted again in a positive way for Ukraine. The rhetoric that is coming out of the United States, and specifically that of Donald Trump over the last couple of weeks, and I know we need actions, not words, but the words are pushing the right way. A, I believe Ukraine can win. B, I believe Ukraine could even take some Russian territory back and get their borders back. And C, all of the talk last night concerning the decision has been made on Tomahawks. He said, I just need to know where they're going to send them. This is what we're looking at this afternoon, October the 7th, and this is a game changer. The reality is the war now gets even more real. Today, I'm going to look at 4 possible outcomes that we're going to be seeing over the coming weeks, months, and potentially years as this continues to unfold. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing, liking, commenting, subscribing. We're growing and we appreciate each and every one of you. Now, I'm going to give you the conclusion first. Usually you wait until the end to give the conclusion, but I'm going to give it to you first. Then I'm going to give you the source of why this is the conclusion. The war in Ukraine is unlikely to end anytime soon. Now, I completely agree with that. I've heard that from so many military guys there in Ukraine on the ground. Neither a sanctions-induced extended recession in Russia nor a slow-growth economy is likely to cause Putin to worry about regime stability. And listen to this one. Ukraine may need to escalate in order to de-escalate, all while maintaining its defensive lines at the front. This is why we could potentially be hearing the stronger rhetoric out of the United States, the continuing rhetoric out of Europe, the supply of weapons, and even game-changing potential weapons for Ukraine. So that's the conclusion. Now, let's look at the source of some of this. Some of this is personal opinion. Some of it is experience. Some of it is Ukrainian analyst I follow. And then I'm also using today the CSIS. This is the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They just released a document, Russia's War in Ukraine, the next chapter. One of the key authors of that is this person, Maria Snegovaya. And she is Russian. Maria Snegovaya is a senior fellow for Russian and Eurasia with Europe, Russia, and Eurasia program at the Center for Strategic International Studies and a postdoctoral fellow at Georgetown University Wash School of Foreign Service. This is what I like right here. She studies Russia's domestic and foreign policy as well as democratic backsliding in post-communist Europe and the tactics used by Russian actors and proxies who exploit these dynamics in the region. She knows what she's talking about. She's of Russian descent. She understands the culture, of course, and she has the background, the expertise, and the resume to talk about this. So let's jump straight in here. Here are some of the scenarios we're looking at coming up. Scenario number 1, highly unlikely, a Russian breakthrough and a Ukrainian military collapse. I know nobody wants to hear that right off scenario 1. Remember, I've already given you the conclusion first. Putin appears to be hoping to grind down the Ukrainian forces on the front and eventually overwhelm Ukraine's military. Yet Russia has struggled to make major territorial gains. That's a fact. Its losses have been massive. That's another fact. And the fresh manpower it throws into the fight lacks the combat training and skill necessary to achieve a major breakthrough. Moreover, Ukrainian drone and artillery coverage means any breakthrough would likely be quickly neutralized, which they are. And in addition, the front line is becoming well fortified, both sides, further reducing the prospect of a Russian breakthrough. This is highly unlikely. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden Russia's in Dnipro or Zaporizhia or in Kyiv. Not going to happen. Scenario number 2, and this has some possibility. Forever war at a lower intensity. Should the strain of war mount, causing Putin to decide that a decisive victory is implausible and therefore no longer worth pursuing. He would still not need to engage earnestly at the negotiating table. See, this would keep him away from negotiations. It has become a cliche that wars end in negotiations. We've heard that many times. All wars end in negotiations, but that is not inevitable. Wars can simply continue. For Putin, the next best option to winning outright is simply not losing. As long as the conflict persists, Ukraine will be unable to fully decouple from Russia, be unable to join the European Union, be unable to join NATO, or realize its European future. So scenario number 2, forever war at a lower intensity. There's some credence to that. Scenario number 3, and this is interesting. Ceasefire, Russia decides that it wants to stop fighting. This is where we bring like the tomahawk back into the picture here. We bring the rhetoric of DC. It's pretty strong. And I can tell you, we've got Kremlin response on this. Let me show you this, guys. Right here, this is TASS, Russian news agency, and they're paying attention to it right here. Tomahawk supplies to Kyiv may lead to further escalation. This is directly from Peskov this morning, and it's just a repeat of what Vladimir Putin says. And then here, Putin once again clarifies potential consequence of Tomahawk supplies to Kyiv. And those repercussions or those consequences are ruining, I quote, the relationship between the United States and Russia. So this is a critical moment. That is why the thumbnail is the way it is. That's the way the title is the way it is. We are at a critical moment in this war. So this one's scenario number 3, ceasefire. Russia decides it wants to stop fighting. The Kremlin believes any such pause in the war would favor Ukraine. We've heard that for years, by allowing their exhausted forces time to recuperate. And I can confirm they're tired. Thus, for Russia to agree to a ceasefire, conditions in the war would likely need to change, either through economic and military strain on Russia, or more likely, and listen to this one, it's good news here, guys, by Ukraine bringing the war onto Russian territory on a larger scale, i.e., tomahawks, flamingos, increase in drone attacks, infrastructure. And this is what we are seeing. As of the fall of 2025, and today's October the 7th, Russia believes it holds the advantage in the war. We just heard that from Putin at his speeches over the last few days. And Russian morale has remained relatively positive. We won't go there, particularly after U.S. support for Ukraine wavered following the 23-24 suspension of aid. But now we are seeing an American shift of rhetoric, and Zelensky confirming yesterday, if you missed that, you can go back and check that video. Weapons flow is happening. Even though the government in the U.S. is shut down, the weapons flow is happening. And Zelensky confirming. Zelensky also saying not only weapons and missiles, but even systems we're talking about purchasing. Tomahawk possible. And this can change things on the battlefield very quickly. So scenario number 3 actually is a positive. So ceasefire, Russia decides it wants to stop fighting. Why? Because Ukraine is smashing them. That is why. Now, scenario number 4, peace agreement, crisis in Russia, equaling a Ukrainian victory. This scenario in which Russia and Ukraine reach a stable peace that allows them to go their separate ways actually is the least likely. Such an outcome would necessitate a major crisis in Russia, combining economic shocks with substantial Ukrainian military strikes, massive gains, nailing Russia nonstop inside. Now, this is not inconceivable. We're seeing the beginnings of this. We're seeing lines at the gas stations. We're seeing fuel, oil, infrastructure, gas being smashed nightly by Ukraine. It's possible. A sense that the war cannot be won and is pointless at this point, if these things continue, could penetrate the Russian military and society after another year or two. of massive casualties and little to no progress. Ukrainian strikes against Russia need to continue because they can turn public sentiment. The economy could experience a serious shock, possibly a debt crisis, causing a run on the banks. At that point, we are then looking at a Ukrainian victory. And I can tell you this as a side note. Russians are emptying their bank accounts. They are putting their rubles under their mattress. This is already beginning to happen. So I gave you the conclusion at the beginning. I give it to you again at the end. The war in Ukraine is unlikely to end anytime soon. Neither sanctions-induced extended recession nor a slow-growth economy is likely to cause Putin to worry about his regime stability. And Ukraine needs to escalate in order to de-escalate, all while maintaining its defensive line at the front. That is why you're hearing so much about the offensive necessities to supply Ukraine and even hearing them out of D.C. What happens now? We do not need words. We need action. And I believe we're going to see that action. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I look forward to reading your comments on these possible conclusions. Have a great day.